Hello again, opera-loving friends in Tidewater, Hampton Roads, and points beyond. It's my pleasure to be with you once again to close out Virginia Opera's 2019-2020 season with one of the most monumental of grand operas, Giuseppe Verdi's Aida. Aida is really a complex masterpiece. My job goes beyond telling you the story and playing some of the musical highlights for you. To grasp what Aida is and what's going on in it, we're going to have to approach it from several angles this afternoon. We need to talk about African history. We need to talk about European geopolitics, including Pope Pius IX and the Vatican Council of 1870 and the Franco-Prussian War and the Risorgimento, the Italian unification movement, and also personal tragedies in the composer's life that helped shape the contents of this opera that made themselves manifest on the stage. Aida is several things. It is a Romeo and Juliet story. It's a story of warfare. It's a story of espionage. And let's get to it. You know, in terms of African history, well, you probably know that Aida consists of the story of warfare between Egypt and Ethiopia in the time of the pharaohs, at least about 1,000 years before Christ. And this is kind of striking. Do you recall back before the holidays when I was with you to discuss Daniel Catan's opera, Il Postino? And one of my talking points at that time was the fact that it kind of gobsmacked me that even as we were beginning a production of an opera that dealt with civil strife in the nation of Chile, with a government protest turning violent, that the same thing was happening in real life, that the headlines told us of protest demonstrations in Santiago that created a state of emergency in 2019 in Chile. The opera was written as a case of art imitating life, but as our curtain went up on opening night, life was imitating art. And guess what, friends? It's happening again with Aida. And it was happening in Verdi's own time. This is the amazing thing. And here's what I'm talking about. So Egypt is attacking Ethiopia in the time of the pharaohs, 1,000 years before Christ. Okay, fine. Now, Aida had its world premiere on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1871. Only a few years later, in 1874, when Aida was still a hot ticket on the European continent, the Khedive of Egypt wanted to expand his empire. He wanted to attack Ethiopia so that he would have Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia in a big empire that he would try to make more European outlook than African. It didn't work out too well. Interestingly, the Khedive hired mercenaries from America, Civil War veterans, to come over and train his troops. But even so, Ethiopia cleaned up and caused that big project of the Khedives to fail. And that was happening even as Aida was telling the story of ancient conflicts between these two nations. And now today, we have Ethiopia and Egypt on the brink of war again, even as our production is opening. This has to do with Ethiopia's plan to construct a dam where the Blue Nile tributary, the tributary that starts in Ethiopia and joins the big White Nile, the main Nile River at Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. They want to build this big dam to raise the infrastructure in their nation. There's going to be a giant reservoir that will hold billions of cubic meters of water. It will take 7 years to fill this reservoir, and it will reduce the flow of Nile River water into Egypt by 25% during that time. They have had talks after talks after talks about this, mediated by Russia, mediated by the United States, and they are at loggerheads. And the New York Times had an article, series of articles recently, documenting that really it is a powder keg and a dangerous situation, kind of a irresistible force against the immovable object of Egypt's opposition. So we'll see how that works out, but keep that in mind. And, when people say that the art form of opera isn't relevant to real life, it kind of makes me roll my eyes a little bit. You can't get more relevant than great art in all cases, but especially in this case. Well, let's take a look at our drama and talk about, as I generally do, about how the music functions. So, Egypt needs to appoint a military commander to lead their troops into battle with Ethiopia. And there's a young man, a young noble, very ambitious, named Radames, who wants the gig. And the high priest Ramphis kind of tips his hand, and in the opening moments of Act 1 tells Radames that the goddess Isis seems to favor him, so don't be surprised if he gets the commission. And this spurs Radames to sing his first aria, Celeste Aida, one of the chestnuts, one of the familiar arias in all of Italian opera. Now let's talk about this a little bit. I said that Aida is a Romeo and Juliet story, and of course, Aida is an Ethiopian prisoner who has been put into slavery to serve the royal family, especially the pharaoh's daughter, Amneris. Aida is the daughter of the Ethiopian king Amneris, and she's been in slavery in Egypt for some time now. The libretto doesn't say how long. It might have been since she was a child, for all we know. And she is in love with Radames, and Radames is in love with her. So that's the Romeo and Juliet angle, and those things never work out well, do they? Now, as for Radames, this aria reveals that he is kind of a simple young man. His character, you would like Radames. We have, from Marvel Comics, we have the character Captain America, who's loyal and brave and true and a man of honor and fearless. And, that's Radames. He's kind of Captain Egypt, let's say. He has all those sterling qualities, but he's not a deep thinker. He's kind of a two-track brain. And those two tracks are his ambitious desire to get military glory by leading the army, and his love for the Ethiopian slave Aida. And we get both of those sides made vivid in this opening musical number. There is a bit of recitative, an introduction, in which he says, "Se quel guerriero io fossi," if only I could be that warrior to lead the troops. And in his mind, he hears military fanfares, which show that he's focused on his military ambitions. Here's a bit of that. And then he switches to the other track of his two-track brain, and that's not the fighter, but the lover. Now he's going to be speaking about heavenly Aida, Celeste Aida. He's doing it all for her. He's hoping that he can, by defeating Ethiopia, that he can actually facilitate his lover's return to her homeland. In my opinion, this shows he's not the deepest thinker. In other words, he wants to help his Ethiopian lover by slaughtering her countrymen. Well, okay. Apparently, the irony has not yet registered with Radames. Now, one of my main talking points today will be that Aida is an opera in which it's not just that the melodies are attractive. The melodies have meaning. They are literary in that they have symbolism and metaphor contained within them. This is an opera in which the shape and contour of melodies gives you lots of information, and we'll have several examples this afternoon. And here's one. He's singing Heavenly Aida. Well, heaven is up there, right? Up in the sky. He also mentions towards the end of the first verse that he wants to almost elevate her to the status of a goddess. You know, they all worshipped Amun-Ra, the sun god, and he says he wants to build for her a throne near the sun, un trono vicino al sol. So we have both of these references that point to up there in the heavens. And so notice the upward contour of this melody that is basically almost reaching, like a little boy reaching for a cookie jar, reaching for that throne near the sun and those the heavens. Listen to him as his melody graphically describes what he's thinking. Alrighty. Now, what we learn is that it's not just Aida who loves Radames. He is also being pursued, as he has most of his life, by Amneris, the pharaoh's daughter. So we have a classic romantic triangle. We're going to meet Aida next in her great aria Ritorna Vincitor. And what has happened here is that the king has named Radames as the choice of the goddess Isis to lead Egypt into battle. And all of Memphis is there to shout his name and praise him. And even Aida gets caught up momentarily in the hoopla, and she shouts out, Ritorna vincitor, return victorious. Now, you have to understand that Aida is one of the most miserable soprano characters in all of opera. She's miserable when we meet her. She's miserable right through Act 4. And this is because she's in a perpetual, permanent state of conflict. She loves her father Amonasro. She loves her country, Ethiopia. She loves her countrymen. But she also desperately loves Radames. So whatever happens in this war, it's going to be bad for Aida, and she knows it. In her aria Ritorna Vincitor, she is horrified that she actually wished victory for Radames, because that means that throughout her country, people will be killed, women will be raped, children slaughtered, blood running through the streets of the cities, and she's horrified that such a thought ever left her mouth. But then again, she can't wish harm to Radames. Radames is the only good thing in her life right now. It's her reason for living. He's the only person to have been kind to her. So she understands that she's between a rock and a hard place. And I want to play for you now the final section in which she turns over this no-win situation to the gods and says, fix it. Have pity on me. Numi, pietà. Gods, have pity. Pietà del mio soffrir. Have pity on my suffering. Now, I'm going to play this for you, and I want you to listen very carefully to not just the beauty of Leontine Price's voice, but listen to the shape and contour of the tune that she sings, the first couple of phrases, and then she'll repeat it. And ask yourself, do I know any other songs with a melody like that? Because I think you have. And I'll explain that after we hear the final section of Ritorna Vincitor. Now, let's consider that particular little tune. Dee, 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 dee. Do you get where I'm going, listeners? Do you understand? Can you think of a common little tune that sounds pretty much exactly like that if you were just to add, if you were just to repeat the final note? No? Gee, I don't sense that anybody's raising their hands and shouting out the answer. So let me give you a hint, and you're going to kick yourself.
Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies.
Numi pieta. That's right. It's Ring Around the Rosie. There are several little folk tunes that go like that, right? It's raining, it's pouring, the old man is snoring. Or how about when Billy wants to taunt Bobby on the playground? Bobby is a loser, nanny, nanny, boo, boo. Now, where am I going with this? So what? Oh, there's a big so what. In the 1960s, the great Leonard Bernstein gave a series of lectures at Harvard University in which one of the things that he pointed out is that you can find children's playground songs and taunting melodies from all over the world. I don't care if you're talking about Australia or Ecuador or Dublin, Ireland or Paris or Jersey City. The children's songs intuitively seem to come out with this collection of pitches. Da, 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 da. And it's cross-cultural, it's cross-generational. Ring Around the Rosie wasn't written in the 1980s, friends. It's pretty old. So what accounts for this? It seems, well, Leonard Bernstein's theory was that it had something to do with the overtone series. We don't have time to explain all of that, but it seems to be something intuitive. It seems to be a universal refrain of childhood, or even when adults are acting childishly. Ever been to a basketball game where the guy missed the net and everybody goes, air ball, air ball? Nobody sings air ball, air ball. This is kind of an intuitive thing. And so what does it have to do with Aida? Well, when you consider that she is in a situation that she can't solve, she has a problem with no solution, it reduces her to a childish state, a childlike state of helplessness. And when she prays to the gods for pity, it's kind of like in the Judeo-Christian tradition where we think of God the Father. She's like a helpless child asking the gods to be like her parent and have pity on her and somehow come up with a miracle to fix it. Now, if Giuseppe Verdi was in this studio with me and he's listening to me expound on this theory of mine, there are three possible ways he could react. He could say, Glenn, you are brilliant. Absolutely, that's what I was thinking. I kind of like that one. He also might say, Glenn, sweetheart, you're thinking too hard. It's just a tune, take it easy, Glenn. Or the third possibility is he might say, well, how about that? I'll be a son of a gun. You might have something there. Gee, hadn't thought of that. And you know what? I don't care which reaction he would have because it's right there. It's in the music. It is an intuitive refrain of childhood, and Aida is in a childlike state of helplessness. This is what I mean. It's the meaning of the melodies that continues to amaze me and make my jaw drop in great opera. Well, as it turns out, Radames does return victorious. Captain Egypt is triumphant, and there's a big ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue in ancient Egyptian terms, the famous triumphal scene. Oh, yes, that's the one where if you go to Verona, you'll see camels and elephants and horses and ferrets and ostriches and puppy dogs and everything, lots of livestock. I don't know how much of that we will have for you at the Harrison Opera House, but we'll have lots of extras and soldiers and prisoners. And one of the prisoners who comes in during the parade of Ethiopians in chains is Amenazro, Aida's father and the king. Now, nobody knows that he's the king, and he signals Aida to ixnay on the say, don't tell people I'm the king. But he appoints himself as spokesman, and in a very moving passage that I'm about to play for you, he begs the Pharaoh for mercy for the slaves. It's kind of like what Moses did in the book of Exodus. Let my people go. He says, we're defeated. Our tails between our legs. We're no threat to you. Don't kill us. Don't enslave us. Have mercy and let us go. And of course, Aida joins him in this. And here he is, humbling himself, asking for mercy for his people. Now, those stern-sounding guys who came in blasting away at the very end there, those were the priests of the Temple of Isis. And they were saying, what do you mean mercy? King, don't do it. Don't listen to this, baloney. No mercy for the prisoners. Do not let them go. Now, I want to give you some context for this scene. We have, and by the way, Radames joins in with the pleas for mercy. The triumphant warrior himself says, sure, let them go. Pharaoh, very pleased with Radames, has told him, I'll give you anything you want as your reward. Just name it. Well, of course, Pharaoh thinks that Radames will ask for the hand of Amneris, his daughter, but instead Radames throws a curveball and says, no, I agree with this prisoner. Let the Ethiopians go. Show them mercy. They are not a threat. And that's what drew the ire of the priests. Now, here's this context that you need to understand. In this scene, Giuseppe Verdi is being what we would call a political pundit. He is offering commentary on current events that made him appalled right there in the 1870s. And here we need to talk about what had happened with the Franco-Prussian War. Napoleon III withdrew his army from protecting Pope Pius in the city of Rome and moved them north to declare war with Prussia. The Pope, in the Vatican Council of 1870, he and his bishops and cardinals had come out with a controversial bit of dogma, a declaration of papal infallibility. This caused a bit of a divide in Italy and throughout Christendom. And what happened, we have to leap to the end of the Franco-Prussian War. In the same year, 1871, that Aida premiered, about 11 months before that premiere, there was a protest of French citizens in Paris protesting France's loss in the war and Prussia's victory. Adolphe Thiers, the president of the Third French Republic, ordered a wholesale slaughter of these protesters, shooting them down, cutting them down like dogs in the street in an event that was called the Bloody Week. We know that there were at least 17,000 innocents who were killed in this short period of time, and some historians say it may have been as high as 40,000. And this was something that disturbed Verdi. Well, it disturbed many civilized peoples throughout Europe, but Verdi was particularly appalled. And I want you to listen as I read from a letter that he wrote to a friend in which he was talking about the dangerous precedent that this set in Italy. He said, we must be careful. When nations push their values to extremes, disorder can result. France pushed both good and evil to extremes, and this catastrophe is the result. And something like this can happen in Italy. The refusal of our priests to compromise on the dogma of infallibility, papal infallibility, has caused a schism in our country. Your priests are certainly priests, but they are not Christian. And then he goes on to say that the papal court could not find one word of condemnation or pity or any kind of opinion about the slaughter of the martyrs of Paris. And so these priests cannot really be said to be Christian. So when no mercy was shown by religious figures, Verdi was appalled. Now, can you put what we just heard from the triumphal scene of Aida into that paradigm? Verdi is using this scene of the priests of ISIS refusing to grant mercy to Ethiopian prisoners to weigh in on the recent event, which were only months earlier, of the bloody slaughter of war protesters in Paris. That's really what's going on. And Verdi often used, of course, current events to formulate passages where he would render his views in his operas. This is how he became a hero of the Risorgimento, the Italian unification movement. In several operas, he would have patriotic numbers, such as the famous chorus Va Pensiero from his earlier opera Nabucco, the story of Nebuchadnezzar, in which the patriotism of the chorus of Hebrew slaves was interpreted by his audiences as his support for Italian unification in such an oblique manner that it was able to get by the censors. So he became a political hero as well as a musical hero to his friend. And this is what I find so amazing about that particular scene. Alrighty, well, in Act 3, the prisoners have been let go against the better judgment of the priests. However, Amonasro has been retained as a kind of a hostage. He seems to be a powerful person, a spokesman for the Ethiopians, so he's going to remain in captivity, which is fine with him because as we open the famous Nile scene, Aida is waiting for a final rendezvous with Radames. It's going to be their final rendezvous because the next morning Radames is being commanded to marry Amneris by the pharaoh. Nothing he can do about that. And while Aida waits for him to appear, her father sneaks up and says, listen, I have a job for you. And in this scene, this is where Aida turns into a tale of espionage. And perhaps some of you, like me, have gotten very interested in the current espionage drama on the Showtime cable channel called Homeland, starring the great Mandy Patinkin as an American intelligence officer. What we find in the Nile scene of Aida is very similar to what happens in every scene of Homeland. Espionage, and in particular, the turning of enemy agents, turning somebody who is plotting against you into an ally who will scheme with you to defeat the people that he used to come from. Amonasro tells Aida, listen, I know that Egypt is going to attack us again, but our armies are forming, so I need you to get some intel from your lover boy. You need to find out the route that they will be taking. You know, will they be going down Granby Street or take I-64? Because we want to plan an ambush for them, and that's going to be your job. You need to get this intel from the enemy. He's asking his daughter to be a spy. Well, Aida reacts with horror. But he's the man I love. I can't betray him. How can you ask me to do such a thing? And so now Amonasro has to work on her like Mandy Patinkin works on enemy agents in Homeland. He's going to play bad cop, good cop, and that's how you break people. You have to break the agent's spirit, and so that you can manipulate them in being the good cop and get them to do what you want. So when Aida protests that she cannot betray Radames, her father reacts by saying, "Oh, fine, I see, but you'll betray me. Is that how it is? You'll just go ahead and let those nasty Egyptians come into our country and run amok and kill and slaughter. That's all right with you. You want to be the agent of death to your people." He says, "Look, do you see the specter of your mother? She's pointing at you. She's saying, all this death, that's your fault." And then in this short excerpt, he breaks her spirit. It's like the feather that breaks the camel's back. At the top of his lungs, he screams, "Non sei mia figlia. You're not my daughter. Tu sei del faraò la schiava. You're just Pharaoh's slave." And that's it. Aida's spirit is broken. In this next excerpt, you hear her sobbing, pleading, "No, don't say that. I am your daughter. I'm not just a slave. I'll do what you want. I'll do what you want." And now that he's broken her, now he can be the good cop, and he can say, "Well, that's how you're going to be the hero. You're going to save your suffering people." In a melody that certainly has fatherly compassion in it, but the long view to take of this passage is that he is using and manipulating his daughter. So Amonasro has proved to be a very effective intelligence officer. He has turned his daughter from somebody who would never think of betraying Radames to somebody who is now going to conspire against him. And now this is exactly like the Homeland, which is, by the way, just editorial. I really highly recommend, if you're not watching Homeland, it's a terrific drama and you really should. And then the similarity will strike you because now that Aida has been turned, broken and turned, it's her job to break and turn Radames, to turn Captain Egypt into working against into betraying his own people. And when Radames joins her and is so He tells her, listen, I still love you. I know I have to marry Amneris, but it shouldn't change anything. I still love you more than anybody in the whole world. She's going to do the opposite of her father. To break and turn Radames, she's going to play good cop, bad cop. So in this excerpt, we're hearing her be good cop. She's going to try to basically seduce Radames into running away with her. She says, look, you don't have to marry that Pharaoh's daughter. We can be together. Nobody's watching. Let's run away. We can go to Ethiopia. She says, it's just, you've never been there. It's wonderful. The beautiful forests, the crystal clear rivers. And, have you ever had an Ethiopian steak? They're tender and juicy and marbled and so forth. And here she is painting a picture. Now, again, when this will be my third example of how contour and shape of a melody is very suggestive. You'll hear a passage in this excerpt in which she goes up to a high note and then sings kind of a looping little passage. Da ya ya da da ya da da ya da da ya da da. You hear those little loop-de-loops in her vocal line? In my imagination, that's Aida wrapping Radames around her little finger. Now, Radames says, well, I'm sure that those steaks are lovely and juicy and delicious, but I'm an Egyptian. I have to have honor. I must keep my integrity. I cannot betray my people. Well, good cop didn't work, so now she will get him by playing bad cop and saying, I see how it is. Well, I guess you never loved me. I guess this was just a game to you. Get out. I don't want to see you ever again. Which makes him panic-stricken, and impulsively he just blurts out, okay, fine, we'll go. Let's go to Ethiopia. I can't do without you. And innocently she says, okay, sweetheart, but, we don't want to run into the Egyptian army. So tell me, are they going to be going down Granby Street, or are they going to take the interstate? He says, yeah, I think we better stick to the back roads. We'll go down Granby because they're going to be marching down I-64. And from this point, everything happens in a big rush. In just a few fleeting minutes, Amonasro pops out and says, good job, daughter. You got the intel I needed. We'll be waiting for Egypt. Amneris comes out and takes in what's happening and says, you traitor, traditor. Aida and Amneris run like the dickens and escape, and Radames, who is horror-stricken of what he's been manipulated into doing, gives himself up to the priests and allows himself to be taken prisoner under arrest. Now, in Act 4, in the first scene, we have the greatest duet for a mezzo-soprano and a tenor in all of opera. Amneris, and unfortunately our time is so limited, I haven't been able to play you any of her previous material, but that's okay. We'll make up for it in these next excerpts. Amneris, who loves Radames desperately, wants him to survive. He's about to go on trial as a traitor, and the charges will be read, and she wants to salvage this so that he will not have to be executed. So she calls for Radames, and they have a very awkward confrontation. It's awkward and rather stiff and formal, as you'll hear in this first excerpt, because He knows that she loves him, and she knows that he can't stand the sight of her. So as she sings, you'll hear that the melody is fairly restrained, fairly unemotional. You'll hear this awkward formality as she is saying, "Look, I want to I want to save your life. So plead innocent. Just tell them you're not guilty, and I will back you up. I've got leverage. I'm the daughter of the Pharaoh. They will listen to me." And when Radames replies in that same stilted, formal, awkward melody, he says, "That's okay. I'm good." He said, he says, "I'm not a traitor. I made a mistake, but it wasn't my fault, and I'm not going to offer any defense. I'm ready to die." This leads Amneris to lose her composure, to burst out with a statement that's as emotional as that previous excerpt was restrained and kind of regal. She's not the princess now. She's a woman in love, and she's begging Radames. She says, "You have to live. For you, I have already felt the horrible anguish of death. I have loved, I have suffered, I have passed every night in tears. My country, my throne, my life, I would give it all up for you." She makes herself naked in front of him. And when I say that this music erupts, I mean it erupts. And did you notice again the contour and shape of that melody? The roller coaster quality. A woman who's at the end of her rope with the heartbreak of Radames's rejection. Now, the thing about Amneris, she's done this previously in this opera. When she doesn't get what she wants, she lashes out in rage. She has a hair-trigger temper. And when Radames says, "I'm going to reject you because you are the person who took the woman I love from me. Why would I want to go on living?" My answer is no. So she flies off the handle, erupts in rage, and basically says, "Fine, just die then." Friends, I have a question for you. Have you ever lashed out in anger at someone and then felt remorse immediately after and felt sorry for what you had done and wished you could take it back. That is Amneris' tragedy at this point, because Radames is dragged off to face the judges of the priests of Isis. They read out the charges. He stands mute. He's condemned to death. And we watch Amneris just kind of collapse within herself, realizing that she could have saved him, but she didn't because she lost her temper. And now he's doomed, and she did it. And this is when her spirit is broken. But it wasn't because of espionage, as with Radames and Aida in the Nile scene. She has broken herself, and that is her tragedy. Well, that leads us to the conclusion of the opera, the famous tomb scene. It's not a good way to go, my friends. Radames is condemned to suffocate in a small crypt made of stone in which there's limited oxygen. And as that oxygen dissipates, he's going to suffocate to death. As it turns out, from the shadows in the corner of the crypt, there is Aida, who has snuck in before him to die with him. And together they're going to sing their farewell to earth. Now, the ancient Egyptians did believe in life after death. That's why when they find these tombs with the mummies in them, the mummies have all their stuff with them, all their jewels and their baseball cards and their collection of recipes and everything, so they can take it up to heaven with them. And so Aida and Radames fully expect to go to that next best life. And they sing, O terra addio, O earth farewell, addio vale di pianti. That's an expression we use in English. Farewell to this vale of tears. Now, this is my final and best example of how melody, shape, and contour, melodic shape, gives us meaning. Where is this afterlife that they want to go to? Again, as with Celeste Aida that we spoke about at the top of this broadcast, it's up there, right? So we're going to have a melody that sounds like it's reaching upward for that next life that's in a better place beyond this one. See if you can detect that contour. Now, did you hear it? That da-dee-ya-da-da, reaching again like the little boy standing on tiptoes trying to reach the cookie jar. Their voices are craning upwards. Now, a little bit more about this melody before I leave you this afternoon. That's a little too high for me to sing, so I'm going to give you an example in a different key. Suppose we have a major scale, like Julie Andrews taught us in The Sound of Music. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now, if you take the melody of O terra addio, it works like this. Do, ti, do, la, ta, 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 dum, ba, dum. Do, ti, do, la. So at first, it seems to fall a little bit short. Let's say that in this paradigm, the bottom note, do, is earth, and the note an octave above, do, that's heaven. Well, they almost didn't make it, did they? They fell one step short, but then with second effort, like a fullback plunging over the goal line with second effort, they made it up to that high do. So we know that they made it up to heaven. This is a very influential kind of melodic contour. It has been used by Leonard Bernstein, by Harold Arlen, and by the Dean of American Opera Composers, Carlisle Floyd. Now, I've got 3 examples for you. Think about the end of West Side Story when Tony is dying in the arms of Maria. And what do they sing? There's a place for us. Didn't quite make it all the way up, did they? But with second effort. Somewhere a place for us. Oh, okay, they made it with room to spare. Tony and Maria will find that place for us, which is the next life. How about another? There's a little girl I'm thinking of, and children don't go through the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune as much. They're a little more optimistic. Things come more easily to them. And here's a little girl who got up to the next place very easily.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high.
Little Dorothy made it in one go. Good for her. Over the rainbow, that good place. Well, it had a wicked witch in it, but it turns out to okay at the end. And I've got one more example, and this is from the most famous and successful American opera, not counting Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, and that would be Carlisle Floyd's Susanna, a product of the 1950s. We did it here at Virginia Opera back around 2007 or so. And we met Mr. Floyd. He's a lovely gentleman who's now in his 90s, but you would swear he's in his 70s. And this is the apocryphal story from the Apocrypha of the Bible of Susanna and the Elders. And Mr. Floyd said it in the American Southeast in Appalachian Hills. And Susanna is a young girl who is kind of an outcast from the villagers below at the foot of the mountain. She's really never gotten off of that mountain, and she sings an aria, Ain't It a Pretty Night, in Act 1, in which she expresses her hopes and dreams. And basically, it's very simple. She wants to get off that mountain. She wants to see the rest of the world. She wants to see how other people live, the cities and towns and the things she reads about in the catalogs that come in the mail. She reminds me of Ariel in the Disney animated film A Little Mermaid, in which she's, I want to be part of their world. So this is what's being expressed, but listen to the first few notes of Susanna's aria and think of it in terms of what this melody contour is telling us. Uh-oh. I'm a little concerned because let's go back to our solfege example. Do, 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 ti, ti, la. It didn't go ti, do. It went down, ti, la. That's not good. She, at least in her melody, she didn't make it to the place she wanted to go. And how does the opera end? Well, as a matter of fact, her brother Sam is killed. She becomes rejected by the townspeople because they believe that she is sexually promiscuous, and they're all very, unforgiving religious folks. And so as the curtain comes down, Susanna, we see, is a prisoner in her house. She's sitting in a rocking chair on her front porch with a shotgun across her lap to protect herself, and we understand that she will never get off that mountain. She will never get to the place she wants to go. And it is all foretold back in Act 1 in those first few notes of her aria. Isn't that amazing? And we first heard an example of this kind of theme, of this kind of melodic meaning in Verdi's Aida with O Terra Addio. Well, I hope that I have given you some new insights into an opera that is familiar to many of us. I hope that it's going to kind of enhance your experience at the Opera House. We'll be looking for you. If you don't have your tickets, you'd better go online or call the box office today, because Aida is likely to sell out as it did the last time we staged this masterpiece. So thanks for listening, and I will be looking for you. I'll see you at the opera.